There once existed an empire so vast that the sun literally couldn't set on its territories, but its own power became the reason for its downfall. This empire was Spain. They conquered continents, discovered new worlds, created the foundations of modern currency, and did all of this only to lose almost everything. So what went wrong? And how did an empire that seemed unstoppable collapse in a single historic moment? Let's find out right now. What awaits us in Rome is precisely there, the Iberian Peninsula, which was actually settled by the Iberians. The Phoenicians gave the term for the politician, and the Romans adopted the name Spain and cemented it in world history for a millennium. It is precisely Spain that is practically the key claimant to the title of the main successor of the Roman Empire. For 2 centuries, they still used the double-headed eagle in their emblems, and the last titular emperor of Rome, Andreas Palaiologos, in 1502 transferred the Roman crown to Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. We'll come back to them later. But for now, the main thing is to realize how significant Spain was for Rome and how unlucky Spain was after the collapse of the western part of the empire. Being territorially too far from Byzantium, it was left without strength against the Germanic barbarians. The Visigoths established their own kingdom there, and when Byzantium finally tried to save the lost Romans, they, the Visigoths, called the Moors for support. Under the term Moors, we mean Muslim conquerors whom the Visigoths invited to Spain. But in reality, among the Moors, there were not only Arabs, there were also Berbers, inhabitants of Africa who had adopted the Muslim faith. They expelled both the Byzantines and the very Visigoths who had invited them from the peninsula, and Spain for centuries became part of the Caliphate and its successors. This is perhaps a unique episode in history because the Reconquista, the process of liberating the Iberian Peninsula, took 700 years and included crusades, revolutions, and guerrilla wars. It's a whole plot for a separate video. If you want to see it, let us know in the comments. What's astonishing is that during almost 1,000 years of the Reconquista, the Spaniards managed not to lose their national identity. Something like that definitely never existed in human history, and it was exactly this phenomenon that became the foundation of the power of the Spanish Empire. Its inhabitants preserved a direct connection with their Roman ancestors, carried it through the centuries, and at the same time were extremely eager to create a state. Along the way, in countless wars and constant travels, they accumulated combat, spiritual, and commercial experience that simply had no equal in Europe. Being the spearhead against the Muslims, Spain became the center of Catholicism in Europe, and had only one difficulty: retaking territories from the Muslims piece by piece. As a result, Castile, the Kingdom of Leon, Aragon, and about a dozen quasi-states emerged. Uniting them was difficult, and throughout the entire 15th century, political marriages raged, which culminated in the grand wedding of Ferdinand II and Isabella I. Under their rule in 1492, the Emirate of Granada fell, the last Muslim possession in Spain. This year is considered the founding date of the Spanish Empire because Spain, armed to the teeth and accustomed to trials, no longer intended to stop. On one front, Spanish merchants trying to bypass Muslim states sailed across the Atlantic and discovered a new continent. On the second front, the Spanish Church, which had 700 years of defending Europe from Islam behind it, became the most influential church on the continent. And on the third front, politicians accustomed for centuries to entering marriages for survival applied their skills in peacetime. Philip II concluded a dynastic union with the English Queen Mary Tudor. His relatives intermarried with the Italian Medici dynasty, one of the wealthiest in Europe. And Francisco de Vitoria went to cooperate with professors at the University of Paris. The result was the beginning of Spain's golden age in the 16th century. Francisco de Vitoria would lay the foundations of international law. His students in Salamanca created the world's first system of banking branches in Europe. Spanish writers led by Miguel de Cervantes would open the genre of the picaresque novel, and the musician Francisco de Salinas would become the founder of modern musical theory and the modern organ. Admit it, you didn't expect such a significant influence of the Spanish Empire on the modern world. But that's not all. Potatoes, tobacco, corn, cocoa, tomatoes, and beans, these too were gifts to the world from the Spanish Empire. It was its inventive merchants who saw commercial potential in them and brought them to Europe for cultivation, adapting them to European needs along the way. Cocoa in America was originally consumed with chili as a sauce and wasn't even considered sweet. Try the historically accurate chocolate for fun. It will definitely free up a few hours of toilet time from watching videos. And the Spanish conquest of America is also a maximally underrated story, because first of all, few people understood the meaning of these events at all. Britain, for example, would begin economically developing its colonies only by the end of the 18th century, and it was Spain that laid the foundations of the economy of both American continents. We know a lot about the conquistadors, their cruelty and military tricks. Hernán Cortés in 1521 conquered the Aztec state with only about 1,000 infantry and cavalry. The key to success was an advantageous alliance with the Tlaxcalans, who were not against the fall of the Aztecs. Francisco Pizarro in 1532 had only a few hundred conquistadors, but an enormous number of locals dissatisfied with the Incas, and together they toppled the empire. Word for word, with the participation of at best 10,000 people in total, the Spaniards almost completely conquered North and South America. There were sad episodes with the destruction of local writing, books, and history, but few people pay attention to the fact that it was Spain that brought the Roman plow to America and taught the locals how to use it. Spain brought carts, cranes, forges, mining, and blast furnaces. Spain brought oxen, donkeys, mules, and horses. And these innovations spread far beyond the controlled territories. For example, the Mustang horse, which is practically a symbol of the USA, is a direct descendant of the very first horses brought to America from Spanish territory. The American dollar is essentially the same as the Spanish dollar because by the time the British colonies were just getting on their feet, they had extremely developed Spanish colonies right next door. Spain brought to America a clear and strict system of state administration. All institutions from courts to ministries, and of course the dollar, more precisely the peso, into which the silver mined in Mexico was melted. The currency had a clear exchange rate, distribution rules, minting regulations, and by the time the USA appeared, it already had wide circulation. Even the famous dollar sign, according to one version, comes from the abbreviated designation of the peso. In fact, from almost the beginning of the 18th century, the Spanish peso was the main international currency of the planet. But even that is not the most interesting thing. Have you ever wondered why the indigenous population of the USA, the Indians, have a completely different attitude toward colonizers than all of Latin America, which is overwhelmingly Christian, honors the Spanish language, and erects huge statues of Christ? The thing is, the myth about the Spanish Empire exterminating the indigenous population is also a projection of the British. History is written by the victors, and the British colonizers who arranged hell for the indigenous population later retroactively counted the Spaniards among the exterminators as well, although Spanish colonization is characterized precisely by the relative weakness of racial conflicts. Rather the opposite. The Spaniards were fierce Catholics, and for them the local population were simply lost sheep of the faith. That's how such an unusual and colorful blend of cultures emerged that preserve both local customs and the Spanish language and faith. The only real difficulty was centralization. While neighboring Portugal clearly united its colonies into the state of Brazil, Spain vacillated. The colonies formally obeyed the crown, but were essentially governed locally according to the wishes of a specific person. That's why Brazil clearly remembers its Portuguese roots today, while Spain has several dozen successor states in its resume with very different attitudes toward the former colonizers. But that's now. At the beginning of the 19th century, the Spanish Empire received the title of the Empire on which the sun never sets. Literally, because the empire was so colossal that somewhere it was day and somewhere it was night. In 1790, the colonies in India, the Americas, Southeast Asia, and Africa together had 20 million people. This puts Spain in 5th place on the list of the largest states in history, right after the USSR and before the Qing Empire of China. In terms of wealth, the Spanish Empire could easily compete with the British because Mexico, Peru, and other colonies in the New World were incredibly rich in precious metals. 83% of all colonial wealth on the planet in 1600 belonged to Spain. 180 tons of gold and 16,000 tons of silver were exported to Europe just from 1500 to 1650. For comparison, all other European countries combined had only 88 tons of gold over 3 centuries from the 16th to the 19th. Spain accounted for 85% of the world's silver production and trade. Besides the American dollar, the Indian rupee, Chinese yuan, Japanese yen, Korean won, Philippine peso, and about a dozen other world currencies trace their roots precisely to the Spanish peso because they emerged as its varieties. Spain could literally buy everything. Hence the invincible armada, huge fleets, massive mercenary armies, and the highest standard of living among European states. According to most historians, it was this that ultimately ruined the empire. Spain didn't bother with production, preferring to buy everything. As a result, already by 1543, 65% of the Spanish crown's income went simply to paying state debt. The wealth of the New World gradually began flowing not to the country, but to bankers who took it as payments. Officially, the Spanish Empire lasted until 1979, but in reality, by the mid-19th century, no one considered Spain a world-class power anymore. And already in the 18th century, it was mainly busy losing territories. That, by the way, is a great idea for the next video. Do you want to learn about the fall of Spain and the War of the Spanish Succession? Let us know in the comments. That's all for now. We'll be very happy with your likes, and see you soon, friends.